This story comes to us on padded feet, on wings, and on fins from Russia. It comes out of the ancient times and the future times. And it's happening right now. It's a story about a young woman named Masha. And about the ancient heart of the forest. And about the Firebird, the forest spirit, who dwells in its heart, atop the tallest, oldest oak. Masha lived at the edge of this forest, at the edge of the village, if you will, with her mother and father. Her father went every day into the forest to cut wood, and they had chickens whose eggs they would collect to sell, along with mushrooms or berries, herbs and medicines, roots and gifts from the forest. Once a week, Masha and her parents went to the market to sell the firewood and eggs and gifts of the forest. And one particular Saturday morning, when they were at market and had sold everything that they had brought with them, Masha's eyes fell upon a stall where there was a beautiful assortment of paints. Red, vermilion, green, azure blue. Paints with exotic names and plant and animal and insects. Minerals from far off places. Something in Masha came alive when she saw these paints. And her father, who was a man who knew how to see, he knew to see the tracks of the animals in the forest. He knew to make a large bow around the deer when they were having their babies. He recognized where fox and wolf had their dens. And he knew which trees, because he spoke with them, which trees would come with him as firewood and which were to leave. And so when her father looked at Masha and saw the longing and the aliveness in her, he told her he would buy her a set of paints with the earnings of the day. Masha was overjoyed. Yahoo! She brought the paints home. Her father had suggested that she paint the eggs that they sell at market, and she could hardly wait until the next morning to go collect the egg from the hen house. As soon as she woke, she crept down the stairs in the hen house, but it was way too early for any of the hens to have laid anything. So she crept back upstairs, snuggled herself back in bed. A second time, a little while later, she went back down the stairs, quietly so as not to wake her parents. It was still too early for any chicken to have laid any egg. But this time she stayed awake, and began the chores and began making breakfast. And in a little while she heard, and she knew that a chicken had laid an egg. Out she went like a flash, collected the still warm egg in her hands, ran upstairs to her table, got out her paints, and began. She was an inspired painter who knew that she had such talent. Her patterns and designs of leaf and forest creature seemed almost alive. Every day after she would paint her eggs, she would set them to dry and go out into the forest to collect herbs, wild growing vegetables, berries, whatever it was, and also to spend time alone with the wild ones. And to see, now with new eyes, which patterns and shapes and creatures she could paint on her eggs. The first week went by, and they brought the painted eggs to market. And they sold so fast, and the people were so overjoyed and enchanted by the eggs that Masha's father knew he had made the right choice. This went on for a few moons, Masha growing even more skilled with her painting, more inventive with the colors and patterns that she found in the forest and brought home in her heart to paint on the eggs. One day, her mother asked her to bring her father his lunch. You see, usually her mother brought him his lunch because they liked to spend those few moments of time together in the forest. But on this day, her mother had things to care for and tend to, and so she asked Masha to bring him his lunch. Masha went through the forest, delivered lunch to her father, and took off in a new direction where she'd never been before. Deeper she went, farther she went, until the trees grew thicker and taller and older, and the smell changed and the feeling changed until she arrived at the very heart of the forest. There was a small clearing where the oldest oak grew, and a stone covered with moss. Masha sat herself down and breathed in the air of this place, her body pulsing and thrumming with the life energy. She knew very few, if any, humans had come here. She knew that this was the place of the forest spirits. She could hear bird song and mice going about their business. Jays and crows getting feisty. An eagle flying overhead. And heron flying overhead. and she sank into a kind of reverie. And could have stayed there for many hours. Except for suddenly, she heard high above her someone calling her name. Masha. 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 She looked everywhere she could, trying through the canopy of oak leaves to see who had called her name in such song. And suddenly, out of the green leaves burst the most beautiful bird she had ever seen in her entire life. Vermilion and carmine and gold, sparks flying from her feathers and her tail, eyes ancient and feisty and fiery. This was the Firebird. The Firebird flew down to Masha, and Masha greeted her with a bow. And stood with open eyes and probably open mouth in awe of this great creature. The Firebird chuckled. And said to her, I need your help. I am the guardian. We have a little bit to go. Just gonna pause. Paya?
Mm-hmm.
Would you both turn off your mics? Great, thank you. I was getting some feedback, so thank you very much. Okay, so we're back in the clearing. And the Firebird looks at Masha and says, Masha, I need your help. Me? How could I help you? You're the forest guardian. You're the Firebird. She stammered. I guard the 4 eggs of the elements, and I am worried for their safety and well-being. Men are clear-cutting on the far side of the forest, and the Baba Yaga has told me they're coming this way. She also told me she would be happy to take the eggs and keep them hidden from humanity. The only problem is she would keep them hidden from all of us. And these eggs must stay in the wild, under only my care. I have heard of your painting. The eggs of your mother and father's chickens. Would you be willing to paint my eggs as well? And the Firebird showed her a nest with 1 pale blue egg, 1 pale green egg, 1 pale orange egg, and 1 white egg. Masha was overwhelmed and began to weep, looking into the heart of such a mystery. She could only nod her head. And so she took the egg of earth, the pale green one, and wrapped it in her handkerchief, as the Firebird directed. But how will I find you again once I've painted it? Out from her tail, the Firebird took a feather and handed it to her. This feather will guide you. It will glow in the direction you need to go in order to find your way home or find your way to me. Thank you, said the Firebird, and she disappeared up into the canopy of the trees. Masha walked home, ever so gently, carefully, and slowly, holding the most precious treasure she had ever encountered in her life, the egg of earth. As she held it, she could smell moss and leaf litter and compost and mushrooms. It was an intoxicating smell. And she was home and didn't know how she got there. Went immediately up to her room, took out her paints, and began to paint the pale green egg with the pictures of those scents she'd had in her mouth. She painted moss and mushrooms and leaves and mice and squirrels. And in the center of the egg, she painted a gray wolf. When she was done painting, it seemed to her as if she could hear the padding of the wolf's feet. It seemed to her that she could see squirrel running to and fro collecting nuts. She took the feather from the Firebird and walked to meet her. And together they hid the egg of earth in the hollow of a tree. The next day, when the Baba Yaga went collecting mushrooms, she did not see it, even though she walked by. Next, Masha received the egg of water, pale blue, and as soon as it touched her hands, she could smell the salty air of the ocean and hear the far-off waves crashing. She could hear the brook babbling and the sweetness of the spring. Again, using the feather to guide her, she walked home as if she were riding those waves or that river flowing so quickly she didn't know how she got there. She went up to her room and began to paint the azure blue of the ocean, the clear blue of the stream, sea grasses, and water plants, reeds, and marsh grasses, and a rainbow-colored fish glittering and swimming through the stream of it all. Again, she took up the Firebird's feather and brought the egg to the Firebird. Together, they dropped it into the spring where the water seeped out of the earth to flow into what would become the river that was not far from her house. The egg sank to the bottom. And the next day, even though the men with their machines drove over the stream, muddying its waters, the egg was protected. Third, Masha received the egg of air. It felt light to the touch. It was white. On one side, she painted a sun breaking through clouds and an eagle flying high in the sky like the one she'd seen from the heart of the forest. And on the other side of the egg, she painted the darkest night with glittering stars and a crescent moon. She brought this egg to the edge of the forest, where the Firebird met her, taking the egg high up into the clouds, where the Firebird hid it. The next day, when the Baba Yaga went flying by in her mortar and pestle, sweeping behind her as she went, she did not see the egg of air. Firebird's own egg was given to Masha. Light orange and warm. When she came home, she painted the most exquisite heart of fire, vermilion, carmine, gold, white, orange. And as she painted, she became more and more entranced, more and more filled with desire and longing for the beauty and power of the Firebird. And she thought, when she'd finished painting and held it lovingly in her hands, she thought, I could keep this one. I would take good care of it. I don't have any more paints, so I can't paint another one. I could keep this one and have a little bit of the Firebird with me. And as she thought these thoughts, the egg grew hotter and hotter and hotter, and her cheeks burned with shame, and she put the egg down. Just as she was about to pick up the feather to call the Firebird and go meet her, her mother called from downstairs. Masha! I need you to take lunch to your father today! Masha went running down the stairs, grabbed the basket for her father, went running through the forest, brought him the lunch, came running back home. But the egg was gone. Only the feather and the empty pots of paint were on her table. She went down to her mother and asked what had happened to the egg that she had painted and left to dry. Her mother said, "Oh, there was an old woman here to buy eggs while you were away. She asked if we had any painted eggs, and I showed her the one you had just painted, and well, she was so enamored of it, I sold it to her. I thought you wouldn't mind. You can paint another." Masha knew it was the Baba Yaga that had come and had taken the fire egg for herself. Taking the feather of the Firebird's tail in her hand, she said, "Show me the way to Baba Yaga's house." And the feather began to glow. And she began slowly, with great fear, and great courage, and great determination, and a little bit of curiosity, to walk towards the Baba Yaga's hut. And she walked, and she walked, and she walked in parts of the forest she'd never been. And suddenly she came upon a thicket of thorns, so large she could find neither the side, the end, the up, or the down way through. She stood there and remembered how this whole journey had begun, how she had sat in the ancient heart of the forest, and the Firebird had called her name, Masha. But this time it wasn't the Firebird. Padding up next to her was the gray wolf. "Climb on my back," he said. "Climb on my back, and I will jump over the thicket and bring you safely to the other side." And so she climbed upon the gray wolf, and he leapt and came down on the other side safely. And with her gratitude and thanks, the wolf melted back into the forest. And she walked. And she walked on. And she walked on through parts of the forest she had never came to a river, moving so deep and swiftly she could not cross it. As she looked into its heart, she thought of the second egg, the egg of water, and the sound of ocean and brook and rain on leaves. "Hold on to my fin," a voice said to her. "Hold on to my fin," a voice from the water. It was the rainbow fish. And so she climbed into the water and was carried safely through the current by the rainbow fish to the other side, who, with her gratitude and thanks, sunk back down into the waters. And she walked on and on. And once more and once again she walked on until she came to a large fog bank, and she could not see. Not behind her, not in front of her, not left, not right. She couldn't even see the glow of the feather anymore. And she simply thought, "Help me, please." "Masha!" came a voice from high, high above. It was Eagle, descending. "Climb upon my back and I will carry you to the Baba Yaga's house." And so Masha was brought safely right to the gate of Baba Yaga's hut. And with thanks and gratitude, the eagle flew back to the clouds. And Masha turned to face the hut, the house of Baba Yaga. It whirled and twirled on one chicken leg. There was a fence of human thigh bones with human skulls, with green fire coming out of their eyes. The whole thing made an awful, shrieking, creaking racket. And there stood the Baba in front of her house. She was huge and ancient and smelled of rot and decay and blood and birth. She had a cave for a mouth with sharp, razor-sharp canine teeth and iron molars for grinding. She looked at Masha. And Masha looked back. And with the feather of the Firebird in her hand, she took a deep breath, opened the gate, and walked through. "You've come for the egg of fire, haven't you?" said the Baba. Yeah, said Masha. "It's too late. I have it hidden." "Firebird!" called Masha. "Help!" And out from behind the darkest cloud, out from the highest trees, out from the middle of the forest, the Firebird came flying in her gold, sparking, streaking, calling, coming straight for the Baba Yaga. The Baba Yaga noticed that she was about to be attacked by the Firebird. She lifted her hands in the air and wanted to catch it. The Firebird let itself be caught and flew directly to her. As soon as Baba Yaga's hands touched her, she burst into flame. In that moment, Masha saw that the egg of fire began to glow in the basket where it was hidden, and she went as fast as she could to get it. The Baba Yaga threw the bird, flaming in her hands, to the ground. And Masha knew she must throw the egg egg of fire, into the flames. She took a deep breath, aimed, and let it loose. The fire exploded in a rain a volcano as soon as the egg reached its heart. And it engulfed everything around it. The Baba Yaga, the hut, Masha, and the trees. When Masha awoke, it was night, and she was in the clearing in the heart of the forest. Next to her on the ground was the pile of ashes that was the Firebird and the egg of fire, still echoing a glowing warmth. And Masha, devastated at the loss of both, began to weep. And weep. And weep, and her tears fell on the ashes as she wept her love and her loss, and the loss of the Firebird at the heart of the forest. At dawn, she stopped her weeping and began to look around. The animals had come. The jays and the crows and the ravens and the eagles and the wolves and the foxes and the badgers and the deer and the owls, all of them had come. But they knew something she didn't know. The first rays of sun arrived in the clearing, magically landing exactly on the pile of ashes. And in that moment, the ashes burst once again into flame, and the Firebird came shooting out of it, screeching and calling and singing with joy. Masha began to laugh and to dance, and the birds began to sing. And the Firebird called to Masha, "Thank you!" And one golden tail feather came floating down from the ancient oak's canopy and landed at Masha's feet. She took the feather in her hand, and although she didn't need it anymore to find her way home, was blessed by having it with her. And she walked through the forest, full of aliveness, full of magic, full of having stood face to face with the Baba Yaga, full of wolf and rainbow fish and eagle, and full of her own power to paint. Such magical creature aliveness. When she reached home, her parents were just coming down the stairs to do chores and have breakfast. And they just watched her as she walked by in her own world, wondering where she'd been for the night, sensing something had changed in her. And she walked up the stairs to her room and went to her table lay the feather in its place. And there, on the table, all the pots of paints had been filled. And Masha sits there still, painting her eggs. And many, many more adventures have come to her because of her exquisite power to paint magic and new life. But those are stories for another time.